welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts and, of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which, of course, I encourage you all to do. Lei, good morning. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 121. And I'm coming live to you live from Beijing, China. And I've been here since I arrived on the morning of the 20th from Frankfurt. And it's been a busy few days meeting families and friends, and I feel like I've already gained a few pounds.
But tell us how cold it's been there, please.
Oh, it's Beijing has been a sauna since yesterday. Well, since when I arrived, basically.
So hold on a second. So China history and kind of culture, there are 4 cities that people will argue about, and there's 6 cities that people will argue about are the 4 furnaces. Which 4 furnaces are you talking about? And do we agree that Beijing is not one of the 4 furnaces?
Beijing is, well, I'd say Beijing is definitely one of the 4.
But it's not traditionally been.
I think the traditional ones are Chongqing, Nanjing, Wuhan, and maybe Beijing, if we include Beijing, but probably another city.
I thought it was Changsha.
This is a record-breaking heat wave that we're in right now. Yesterday was the hottest day on record for June, and the second hottest temperature ever recorded in the history of Beijing. I think it was 41.8 degrees. So pretty much you stay inside.
Which equates, for our American friends, that means about 105 degrees.
105, 106. So I've never experienced this type of heat, even having lived in Beijing for this long,
Let me tell you a quick, funny little anecdote. So my wife, we are in Durham, North Carolina. My boys are in a sports camp. North Carolina is normally beautifully sunny. And this entire week, we got here on Sunday, the entire week it's been pouring rain. So
it's been weird.
So my wife has posted pictures of us in Durham, and she talked about how rainy it is. And then one of the responses on the WeChat comments was that, they would love to have rain in Beijing.
Oh, yeah.
Right
now.
Yeah.
And some, cool down. Yeah, so this is the first time that we've done this show with me live in Beijing. Because last time I was in China, it was a quick trip for Auto Shanghai. And so I didn't have time to, I'm going to be here for 2 months. And basically the last few days, I've been seeing families and friends, having a lot of food. I've been driving a lot, shuttling back and forth from, all my packed apartment stuff, trying to figure out what to throw away and what to keep. And that's what I've been doing the last few days. So it's been pretty hectic.
Lei, stay efficient.
But you come right back to the rhythm, to the vibe, how you drive, right? Everything's pretty slow. A lot of cut-ins, a lot of mopeds, a lot of construction. I tell you, there's still a lot of construction going on.
Let me interrupt you there, Lei. When we talk cut-ins, in the United States, you can have probably 3 or 4 or 5 meters of space in between cars without the car on the left. Let's say you're on a highway. You could actually be in city driving. And in the US, if you have 4 or 5 meters or about 10, 15 feet, car's length worth of space in between you and the next car, the car in front, you're probably not going to have somebody cut into your lane.
No.
In China, if there's 1 meter's worth of space, if their nose is ahead of your nose on the vehicle, they will cut in front of you. for sure.
I think the expectation here is you expect others to cut in. So because the speeds are pretty slow anyway. So if people cut in, you let them cut in, and that's it. That's the expectation. So,
and I'm gonna say as a foreigner living in China, one of the things that I really noticed a lot was the passive aggressiveness of China drivers, because they know they're being aggressive, but they would refuse to look at you when they do it. So when, for instance, they cut in and you have to suddenly stop, and then maybe 30 seconds later, you might pass them because you changed lanes. You look over at them and they know you're looking at them.
You know, one thing I notice is that intersections, when your light turns green, you don't immediately jump and drive away, because you have to wait for these mopeds who are jumping the light in the other direction to go through first. And then you go.
I have to say that when I first arrived there were no traffic rules. There were no traffic laws.
Yeah.
There might have been traffic laws on the books, but no one paid attention to them. No one did. And you parked anywhere you wanted to. So if you go to Shanghai, it's actually really, really orderly. Beijing is a step under that. And then if you go to the tier 2, tier 3 cities, it's still pretty wild, wild west from a transportation standpoint. So
yeah, Beijing is the wild, wild east. So, but I'm used to it because I like I said, I tell people that I meet, I say to us coming back, everything felt exactly the same without that 3 years of whatever that went on, right?
No, man, you gotta admit that there's not as many foreigners.
Right. And me, I'm kind of...
So it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah, not the same, right? So I could be considered a local, right? I drive often. So it's really interesting. Anyways, I'm still just digesting being back, because I'm gonna be here for longer this time.
Physically and mentally, right? Because you're eating the Chinese food again. So
yeah, Chinese food and just so much. Just meeting these people that you last met 4 years ago and seeing their kids grow up, they're all changed and stuff like that is really a little bit jarring. And really, again, seeing all these different kinds of EVs on the roads, it's like so refreshing, because I've been talking about it for 3 years, right? 2.5 years.
Beijing is probably 80% of Shanghai from a standpoint of the number of green plates that you see in Shanghai versus a Beijing.
Oh yeah, there's still a lot of ICEs on the roads. Definitely less EVs, but still a lot of green plates.
And I think the major difference between a Shanghai and Beijing is because everything is kind of sort of concentrated in one area in Beijing, and that's in CBD or Chaoyangqu, right? So in Shanghai, you can go to a lot of different districts, a lot of different roads, a lot of different areas, and have traffic jams. But, well, I'll take that back. There are two primary areas. There's West Third Ring Road and East Third Ring Road. So, Financial Street, I think that gets pretty busy sometimes, but pretty much CBD, Stanley Twin area, is where all the traffic jams are going to be starting at around 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So anyways, what are we going to talk about this week?
So housekeeping, just in case, something happens, because I am jumping the wall, but, just that you guys know that this could happen now that I'm here in Beijing. Oh, God. We should get into the
news this week.
Yeah, basically you said 4 more years.
Yes. So can you tell everybody what I'm talking about?
It's the NEV subsidies exemption. I mean, the purchase tax exemption for NEVs being extended for, well, let's say 2 years, and then additional 2 years it will be levied at half the rate, and with purchase tax exemption capped at 30,000 RMB for the 24 to 25, and then 15,000 for 26 and 27. So it's, as we had expected, it's just a matter of time and matter of not if, but when and how long. And now we know.
So no surprises on actually extending it. I think it was 119 or 120, Lei, where you had said it was going to be either 2 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. I thought it was going to be 4 years, I think. So anyways, that's not a surprise. The amounts, what do you think of the amounts, the 30,000 RMB to start? Because
I think the amounts, it's interesting because, so the caveat is anything above 300,000 RMB, you don't, basically is not tax exempt. And the other caveat is, especially for battery swappable vehicles and specifically for NIO, if you have the BAS model, you actually are taxed on the vehicle itself, not including the battery. So let's say for ET5, you're taxed on the 228,000, the BAS model. So that cap of 30,000 actually is more beneficial because you're taxed at a lower pricing point.
And it's prorated based on the price of the vehicle.
And it's interesting that this purchase tax exemption has been in place since September 2014. So 9 years, and it was extended 3 separate times, 17, 20, 2022. Previously supposed to end of this year, and then the latest news extended it. And I saw some numbers that last year, the number of NEVs that were benefited from the purchase tax exemption were around 5.68 million, totaling 87.9 billion in taxes exempted. And by the end of 2022, this tax exemption scale had exceeded 200 billion RMB. And there's some early estimates that the 24 to 27 tax exemption is going to total around 520 billion RMB. So it's a huge number.
So let me, for our Western audience, 1,000 RMB is around $150, $140. So just for frame of reference, so 10,000 RMB is around $1,400 US dollars. So just keep that in mind when he's talking 500 billion RMB. Sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but let's just say you divide it by 7.
Yeah. The 300,000 RMB cap for the price of the vehicle, it's specifically at that point because we have also often talked about this. The share of NEVs priced under 300,000 is close to 90%, right? So that had that in mind.
So let me add a couple wrinkles to that point because you took the words right out of my mouth, Lei. And so what the Chinese government is focusing on is mass market and moving excess capacity because that's going to drive the volume. And let's be clear, the Chinese government is very concerned about the overall economy, and they're very concerned about excess capacity in the electric vehicle space. So they've been giving more scrutiny to companies that want to add capacity for the future, including Tesla, is what I'm hearing. So,
and remember what had preceded this announcement was the support on charging that came out of a state council meeting.
100,000 cities or whatever?
No, that was from MOFCOM, but right before this NEV exemption, purchase tax exemption extension, there was another document. I think that was based on a state council meeting from Li Qiang just before he went on the Germany, France trip, which we can talk about. But so this is again trying to keep that momentum going.
And I think what I'll add just a little bit to what you said because you gave a lot of detail, which is great. I think that by November we should know whether or not this extension of the tax subsidies or the tax abatements have done what they needed to do. If not, the Chinese government might look to do something even more drastic, number one, and then number two, look for the price war to continue because, again, we're looking at capacity and the lack of sales will idle factories for 2, 3, 4 months. If factories aren't running at, let's say, over 75% utilization rates, So a 100,000 unit factory is not building 75,000 cars. Then there's a lot of people sitting around doing a bunch of nothing getting paid. And so you can't do that for a quarter, 2 quarters at a time and not bleed money. So let's remember that. And then excess capacity, because you're paying for the land regardless of whether you use it or not. You're paying for that factory regardless of whether you use it or not. And you're paying for the staff most of the time to not work. So that's why a GM and a Ford historically in the United States, because of the UAW stuff, and in China, it's a little bit different because there are no unions, but it's sometimes better to build cars and sell them at a loss than to not build cars at all. So keep that in mind, because the pressure will be to continue to build cars even if there's not demand. But if they continue to build those cars, the pressure to export them to foreign markets will be increased significantly towards the end of this year if the domestic market doesn't get the boost that they're hoping it does with these continued stimulus. So
yeah. And the other kind of the debate was, it still included the PHEVs and EREVs, which would benefit, actually there's a wave. If you see, there's a wave of models, EREV models coming, and PHEVs following, Li Auto's footsteps. So they are kind of going to benefit from this extension big time.
And I'm gonna say this once and for all, because there's arguments on Twitter about the BEVs versus the EVs. When you and I are talking the China market specifically, we're talking about NEVs. So we'll include PHEVs, we'll include EREVs, because we're talking about NEVs. You and I should specify, and I think we do, whether we're talking about BEVs, whether we're talking about PHEVs, but in general, we're talking about NEVs, which includes all of the above when we're talking volumes and things like that. So this is unique to China.
And EREV is very unique to China. So last year, EREV's total, I think, was somewhere close to a 250,000 units. And Li Auto obviously accounted, I don't know, what did Li Auto do last year? 120,000?
Yeah, something like that.
So this number probably will double to 500,000 this year, because Li Auto is on their way to 300,000 units, likely. And then you add, right? So.
And for our new listeners, EREV stands for Extended Range Electric Vehicle. So it has a small electric motor. And the difference between an EREV and some plug-in plug-in hybrids is that the motor never, the gas engine, the gas motor part.
Yeah.
Yes.
It doesn't drive the wheels. It only replenishes the
gas part never drives the wheels. It only replenishes the motor or the electric motor battery.
So, and Li Auto is not the first company to do it. I think the first company was Nissan with the e-Power, which is the same thing, basically.
So let's move to Volkswagen Capital Markets Day. Did you get a chance to?
No, I didn't get a chance. The only thing I think that stood out to me was Volkswagen wants to remain the number one international OEM. It's a simple statement that actually I think has a lot of meaning behind it. What that really means, I think obviously on the volume side of it, it's easy. I mean, even if they get down to 1 million units, 2 million units, they're still going to be the number one international OEM, because the other ones are also not doing well in terms of growing volumes. But I think specifically, if you've read that, whatever was shared in the press release was this in China for China. So what I expect that to mean, the number one international OEM, is also a lot more China-only, developed in China for China-only models. That's what I would expect.
And simply put, they've given up the volume title, or they're willing to give up the volume title to protect margins.
Right.
And I think this is them looking backwards and saying our trajectory is shrinking too aggressively. We can't save that title. And one of the reasons they can't save that, or let's say two of the main reasons they can't save that title, their poor sales in the United States and their continuing worsening sales in China. So if those people at Volkswagen Group think the Scout brand is going to save them, now Volkswagen USA said they wanted to, or was it Dees that said they wanted to double. I don't know if Bluma is also backing this statement that was made a while ago. They wanted to double share from 5% to 10% by 2030 in the United States. And the ID series vehicles are not going to do it. And so they're looking at Scout, but Scout to me is more niche. And when you're competing against Ford and GM and then Kia in the United States for SUVs, think Bronco, think Jeep, Wrangler, it's going to be tough. They're not going to give up any share to some upstart Scout brand. And it sounds like a cool brand, but man, they need to check all the boxes in order for it to have a successful launch in the US. So Volkswagen has some big challenges, and they've been flat on growth for their revenue for the last 2 years. They want to get back to growth by 2027. And so they don't have a ton of time. And I still feel that they're not ready to make the hard decisions, the tough decisions, because it's still a bunch of car guys. Even GM, even Ford, or even Stellantis have hired ex-Amazon, ex-Apple to lead teams. So
before I got on, I saw your tweet on the comms lady for GM, right?
Yeah.
That was from a tech background. That was interesting.
For those people that don't know, Lin Huawu, who is the ex-comms head for Google, it was reported that she's taken on the role of global comms head for GM. Now, is she the number one on the comms team? It's not clear, but I don't think she would have taken that role if she wouldn't have had the number one job, number one. And number two, I tweeted that she's probably not that interested in talking car stuff. So she's probably not that well versed because she's never had to be. And her contacts are all on the tech side from a media standpoint. So the automotive comms team internally at GM is probably not feeling great. And number two, the automotive journalists that follow GM probably aren't feeling great because now the tech journalists probably jumped the line to get GM scoops. And so, but to your point, Lei, this is another indication of tech people getting hired in traditional automotive roles, and a couple positive check marks. She's a woman and she's Asian. So I think those are also positive things that have nothing to do with the job.
Back to Volkswagen in China. So last few days I've been driving around. It's surprisingly, I've seen many ID3s, ID4s, and ID6s, and obviously tons of other VW badged ICE vehicles on the roads. I didn't get a chance last time because I only stayed for a day. But yeah, like we said, in the volume brands other than Tesla, Volkswagen's leading. So you can't,
You are in Volkswagen brand's backyard, so you should expect to see those.
Yeah. So
a disproportionate amount of those are probably driven by employees. So
I don't know. Yeah.
See, you're too kind. You're too kind, man.
Yeah, I'm too kind. I'm just too kind. Yeah.
So anything else that we got going on this week that caught your eye?
No, I think I was joking that I'm back on the heels of Blinken, and then Li Qiang visiting Germany, and if you saw the 3 deals, right, the 3 deals that Volkswagen, Merck, and BMW signed were with the NDRC. It's not with another partner. It's with the NDRC. And my wife's like, oh, that means they're all good in China. Anytime you have that type of...
Well, you could call it pandering too, right?
Yeah, signing is like, oh, they're good.
One thing I wanted to get your reaction on is this $700 million investment from Abu Dhabi into NIO, 7% of the...
Right. Yeah, that was the other big news. I think now you have the Saudi Arabian investing in Lucid, right? Saudi Arabia. And then now the UAE is behind NIO. So it's almost like there's a bit of a race from that region of the world investing into smart EVs.
There's a couple things going on here that I think are worth mentioning. I think it's a well-needed injection of capital from NIO. I think it's also an outlet for their vehicles. So I think that's both net positives, but 7%. Remember that when Geely acquired 9% of Mercedes, the German government and the Mercedes board got pretty concerned that Geely would want to take on more. And they did, but weren't allowed to, kind of, sort of. So we look at this, is the Chinese government, how will they react if Abu Dhabi doubles down, wants to acquire more of the company? Because right now, NIO is, $9 a share. So if you believe that NIO is going to have a net positive in the long term, then it's a great time to buy NIO. If you're a sharer, if you buy stocks, and I'm not giving advice, by the way. But do you think the Chinese government would have any heartburn if Abu Dhabi decided to double or even get close to 20%?
I think it's still contingent on maybe the respective mutual economic ties behind it, right? There's always kind of a bartering or exchange, if you will, when these things happen.
Well, let's just say that Biden meeting with Modi this week was likely not in a vacuum, right?
Biden, Modi, Musk, Elon meeting Modi, right? Kind of hinting Indian investment. So if you look at these visits, Blinken to China, I think from what I've heard, it seemed to be relatively on the positive side, especially considering flights, right? Where I had to fly from New York to Frankfurt to Beijing just because the flights are still not back and it's so expensive, and then trying to mend that kind of relations, right?
And we talked about this because currently it's a 1-to-1 thing. China is limiting the number of flights.
Reciprocal, yeah.
Yeah, that U.S. based airlines can fly into China. So the U.S. reciprocated by saying there are only so many Chinese flights that can enter the United States. So it's the relationship and diplomacy got to a transactional level. And anytime there's dialogue, I think it's a positive. And so it's better than not talking, right? And if we can work on the things that we can agree on that will ease the tensions, or not the tensions, but the ease some of the coming and going of people, I think that's a net positive. So
and then there's still a lot of chatter on decoupling, right? Even with Li Qiang meeting Olaf, there's some chatter behind the scenes, on German companies and.
Well, yeah, the German government is uneasy about the German companies, blah, blah, blah. And Bluma talked about de-risking versus decoupling, which is, to me, half a dozen on one hand, 6 on the other. So they must have talked to some strategic comms teams and they must have been slapped on the wrist by saying, hey, stop saying decoupling, start saying de-risking.
Yeah.
So, and Mayor Pete last week was in Japan, and he talked about de-risking as well. So this is a reality. What's going to happen is more and more, and we talked about this months ago on a separate podcast, about more mining is going to be happening in Europe. More mining is going to be happening in the United States, despite what some of the environmentalists are going to argue against. More refining, for certain, is going to be happening in Europe, and more refining in the United States. And we're going to see a lot of Europe, the EU, and the United States leaning on partners to help bridge the gap between the domestic capacity and the capabilities and the rare earth metals that they don't have. And they'll try to work together in order to not have to ship batteries from China. So that's going to take a few years, and we're probably not going to see everything play out maturely until around 2030, probably. So
a lot of politics going on the last few days.
We can bring up any guests in a minute, but let me look at my newsletter to see if there's anything else that is worth talking about. NAC is the one. I think we should talk about that. Rivian has now...
NACS, you mean?
NACS, sorry. NACS is the one.
Yeah.
Which is North American Charging Standard, which Tesla started or established. We're going to have plugs starting in 2025 for GM, Ford, and now Rivian.
Yeah.
And Rivian is going to be able to access. Now, remember, Rivian had also created initially their own charging infrastructure, but it looks like they're much more worried about actually trying to get cars on the road than they are about charging. So I think big win for NACS, big win for the United States. And so glad to see that. Stellantis is likely the biggest holdout because I think Merc and BMW will probably come online shortly. And Hyundai Kia is also another holdout that I haven't heard is going to move forward yet. And BYD had established, because you and I were interviewed by Elliot Chen, and one of the points that he made in the Wired China article was that BYD had established a new company, new entity called Ride in the United States. So we'll learn more about that. We'll find out more. I've heard some rumors, but we'll find out more and we'll let you know in coming episodes.
The website still looked familiar, except it's using the Ride, the 4 letters.
Yeah, so they basically whited out all the BYD logos.
Yeah, that's...
because it's still BYD. It's all the same pictures. They just whited it out.
Yeah.
And this week was especially significant on the battery tech side, at least from article standpoint. Volkswagen had announced that they have
coating. No.
Yes, they've created a breakthrough with a partner on dry coating. So what? And I'm oversimplifying this, and this is why we should put a battery engineer on our next Max episode so they can tell us about the process. So there's a cathode and anode, just like a positive and negative side. And in order for the electromagnetic properties to adhere, the current process to use slurry, and that slurry needs to dry. And in order to do that, the process takes up a lot of space on the manufacturing floor. Dry coating eliminates the need to dry the slurry and eliminates a lot of processes that take up a lot of floor space on the factory. So Tesla famously has been working on this with the 4680 battery, and they announced that in 2020. They still haven't commercialized it. There are 4680 batteries going into Model Ys in Austin Giga, but not ramped yet. I think the cathode side of the Tesla battery is still having problems with the mass production. So great news for Volkswagen if they can get it into production within the next 12, 18, 20 months, because I think Tesla will have that figured out in the next 12, 14 months. The second thing is Gotion is adding manganese into an LFP battery, and they said that that's a breakthrough that should go into production next year, and it will match the range of NCM, NCA batteries, be less volatile and less expensive because it's not using nickel or cobalt. So two big breakthroughs, and I mentioned this in past episodes as well, because the Inflation Reduction Act, the investment in battery technology and innovation is going to increase significantly across the world. So what we're starting to see is some of that occurring. And this is, the Gotion and VW announcements were years in the making, but we should start seeing more and more of that as well. And we'll see innovation in charging. We'll see innovation in, I think swapping could become a thing in the United States. So for certain use cases. So hold me to that in 3 or 4 years. And maybe we can get Levi on a Max episode soon. So,
which, when you say charging, it reminded me of, since you had the Li Auto on the topic, was when they had the family tech day. And the bold statement was, the new BEV that is coming out, we're going to be number one. It's going to be the number one selling model of any kind above renminbi, 500,000 renminbi. So that's some of the boldest. I mean, famous last words for Li Bin, right? On the 3 Series, right? Famous last words. So that's pretty much all I had. Lei has a question or a comment or disagrees with anything that we've said. This was a little bit kind of a crazy episode because you and I are traveling, so it's like we're not at our desks. We're a little bit like flustered. So I am a little bit flustered with the jet lag. And
the last thing is that Toyota is using AI to design their EVs. I don't know if you saw that article, but I think that's pretty funny.
I haven't.
They should use AI to name their cars because that BZ
4X.
blah, blah, blah. I don't know. If there are no other questions or comments, let's end it here.
And the housekeeping, I guess, since I'm here, so going forward, we will have this show barring any, changes at Friday mornings Eastern time, 9 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that works. I'm flexible, so
I have to apologize because I've been really slow on getting the past podcasts out. So hopefully we'll do a podcast dump today and Monday. So
yeah, I know. It's lots of things going on, and I sound okay from the wall.
You sound great.
Oh, okay.
I think there might be like a half-second delay, but you sound great.
All right. So I got this figured out this time.
Yeah, keep on using the same tool you're using. But unless there's some special meeting, you should be fine for the next 2 months.
All right.
Hey, everyone. Hey, thanks again for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Yep. Thank you all, and talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.